Good evening, one and all. So, once again, we are here on this virtual platform with with an eminent speaker today. I welcome you all. I welcome all the participants over this virtual platform who are present over the side of this virtual platform. I welcome all the faculty members. I welcome research scholars. I welcome our students of Midnapur College of other institutions. So today we have amongst us a renowned theater personality, I think, from Gour University, Dr. Samipendra Banerjee, and I extend you a hearty welcome on behalf of the Department of English, Midnapur College, to Dr. Samipendra Banerjee, Samipendra Da, and I feel honored and I equally feel privileged to introduce Dr. Samipendra Banerjee in these few words. Dr. Samipendra Banerjee is an assistant professor at the Department of English, University of Gour. He has been teaching English literature at the postgraduate level for over 15 years. He has completed his MPhil from Jadavpur University and PhD from Viswabharati Shantiniketan on historiography and politics of post-independence Indian English drama. He is an active member of the theatre community of Malda. As I mentioned earlier, he leads the drama club of University of Gour and acts and directs plays with his students. These include Brecht's Galileo and Shantara Saptak, an adaptation of Churchill's Seven Jewish Children in 2018-19. He received an international travel grant to present his research at the IFTA conference at University of Sao Paulo, Brazil in 2017. In 2019, he completed his prestigious course from the National School of Drama, New Delhi. He is on the editorial board of several peer-reviewed journals. His research areas of interest are modern Indian theatre, 19th century Bengali theatre, and gender studies. So, Dr. Banerjee is going to speak today on historicizing the stage and overview of modern Indian drama theatre. So, once again, I welcome you, Dada, to this virtual platform, to this online lecture series being organized by the Department of English, Midnapur College. So, over to you, Dada.
Right. Thank you, Tonmoy. Thank you very much. Uh, uh, what should I say? I mean, thank you for this wonderful introduction. I'm humbled, I must say. I don't know if I am really a man of theater, how much I'm a man of theater, because one thing I must say at the beginning, I mean, it is not easy to be a man of theater. It requires a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hard work. What we do at our Gour University, let me just once add to this, is that we have a tiny drama club where we do several, theatrical productions with my students, where my students play the part basically. And yes, we have been traveling. Fortunately, our last production of Galileo was well accepted, and we have traveled to Coach Bihar, we have traveled to Balurghat. For call shows, and I would also request the audience that is here today to when things become normal, if you give us a call to the drama club, and we will come with our recent productions. Okay, of course, first of all, before we begin, thank you Midnapur College, Department of English. Thank you Tonmoy in particular. You have been doing a wonderful job. I have been listening some of the lectures as well. All these, I mean, you have been inviting stalwarts of the English discipline from different colleges, and these have been wonderful lectures, particularly for the students, and to my students as well. Something that Dipankar Da was saying a few days back, that yes, I mean, because of this technology, because of these online classes or online lectures or talk, our students are now everywhere, which is great. So we are through these medium, we can reach out. But one thing, I mean, one problem that I was with which I would like to begin basically is that today, for example, this is being this is a YouTube live that is taking place. For me, as at this end, I cannot see anyone. If we use Google Meet or other platforms, we are at least aware of the presence of the audience. Now, you see, remember that this is very theatrical, isn't it? What is the YouTube live thing? I would say is a later day development, something that we have also seen in theater, the modern theater, where there is a kind of a distinction between the audience and the proscenium stage where the actor acts or enacts. Whereas if you go back to the earlier mode of the online thing, then that was the earlier kind of theater where it was much more of an intimate space where the audience was on all sides of the stage, and there was a greater interaction between the actor and the audience. I always believe that any kind of teaching, any kind of delivery of a lecture, or that for that matter, is a kind of a performance. So on that note, I would begin. This is a very kind of a basic introduction to modern Indian drama and theater, and this is primarily meant for the students. I understand, I assume that mainly UG and PG students of Midapur College and other colleges and universities are here, research scholars are here, and some of my teacher colleagues are also here. So I would give a very basic introduction to the whole thing, and I would like to talk about the whole phenomenon of historicizing, and with an emphasis on the idea of the modern with reference to Indian drama and theater. So is my screen visible? Yeah, okay, it has come. So the title of my talk is Historicizing the Stage, an overview of modern Indian drama slash theater. Now, why do I use this slash theater? And this is something that I prefer to do in an earlier talk also. I maintain this distinction between drama and theater. So this is something that I will come to in the course of the slides. So to start with, let us try to focus on this basic question as to why should we historicize? Why do we need to historicize at all? Okay, because is it necessary that we historicize? Now, when it comes to theater, when it comes to any kind of analysis on theater, it is important not only for the theater artist but also for the critic to understand the context, to understand the basis on which this whole play is being performed, is being presented. So it is necessary to have a sense of the history, where, because we are not standing in a vacuum today, we are, if we are producing a particular kind of a performance, then it has resulted because of certain earlier stances, positions taken by stalwarts. Whether we are aware of those works or not, that is a different issue. So it is very important that we historicize, and here I would briefly bring in this theoretical angle to this. If you, probably everybody knows that this was a famous call, clarion call, that Frederick Jameson famously announced at the beginning of The Political Unconscious, which was published in 1981, where Frederick Jameson said, always historicize. Now, of course, what he meant by this declaration that it is necessary that we should always historicize is that a critical inquiry of the complex and often reciprocal relations between the texts and the sociological, political, and economic events, and therefore that is necessary, and therefore that would also entail a rejection of the new critical paradigms of the verbal icon. Because if you look at the new criticism, then the new criticism was emphasizing on the textuality. Of course, now after the new criticism fell out of fashion, I would say, gradually there was a return to historicity, and now we are in a phase where we both recognize the importance of textuality on the one hand, and the importance of historicity on the other. Because the postmoderns, I mean Frederick Jameson particularly, was always very conscious of this importance of historicizing, because Jameson had also, as the next point refers to, had critiqued our loss of the sense or connection with history, and a certain kind of a fascination with the present. Now moving on from here, therefore, Another aspect of this new historicism, particularly I'm drawing attention to this essay, The Poetics and Politics of Culture, by Louis A. Montrose. Of course, this was a very important essay which was published in Aram Wieser's The New Historicism Reader, where Montrose was arguing that what is the responsibility of new historicism, and that is to recover the cultural specificity, the social embedment of all modes of writing, right? And recognizing in a way that such recovery will inevitably be partial and proceed from our own historically, socially, and institutionally shaped vantage points. Now, this is very important because, on the one hand, I understand the significance or the importance of the cultural specificity or the social relations of different kinds of writing that needs to be, uncovered, that needs to be recovered. But at the same time, this whole process would be determined by a kind of a personal ideology and certain socially and institutionally positioned, determined vantage points. So therefore, this is where, in connection with historicizing, particularly with reference to theater studies, particularly with reference to this whole idea of historicizing, we need to get back to this notion of historiography. Now, what is historiography? Historiography is the writing of history. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, historiography is the writing of history or the principles, theory, and history of historical writing. So what exactly, to be very, very simply to look at it simply, I mean, historiography is the process and the politics of the writing of history. Because how does history reach us? How does history arrive to us? It is determined by a particular position taken by the historian, which is again shaped by certain vantage points, as Montrose rightly refers to. So those vantage points are important. Those vantage points determine my vision of history, and therefore there is this politics of historiography that is very important. Now, when it comes to theater studies, why is historiography or why is it necessary to historicize, particularly when it comes to the historiography of modern Indian theater? There has been of late very important additions to the field of historiography in modern Indian theater. An entirely new realm has opened up, and this lecture or talk, whatever you might say, this is primarily from the perspective that I would like to introduce certain issues which are already probably very well known to the students, but also I would like to encourage the younger scholars towards theater research. Now, what lacks in our country still is the number of good researchers, scholars who want to seriously pursue theater studies in connection with, of course, you see, nowadays we are doing cultural studies in English departments. So everything is a text. Our everyday life is a text. So we also need to look at this very dynamic field of theater studies, and particularly the developments of modern Indian drama, which is why a proper sense of the historiography of modern Indian drama and theater is very necessary. Okay. So, having said that, I hope some of you would be interested in this. Now, having said that, having established this idea of historiography and historicizing, I would now move on to something that I always want to do. Now, I would come back to this idea of the slash that with which the title began. Okay, because the title, if you remember, was Historicizing the Stage, an overview of modern Indian drama / theater. Now, this slash refers to and or. Okay, so it's both drama and theater. Now, what is the distinction between drama and theater? Drama, as many of us probably know, all of us are aware of this. Drama is dramatic literature. Drama is the text, the textual part, the written part. So we always come across drama in the form of the book, but the book is not the theater. When that written text is performed on stage, that is when it becomes theater. Now, when we refer to theater, theater has got this multiple senses actually. Number one, this is the original sense, or this is the traditional sense, the sense of the place, the sense of the in the because the word theater comes from the Greek theatron. So there is a location that is involved here, a place, an auditorium in today's sense. But at the same time, it also is a social event. It is also an institution, probably of national importance, as later critics have highlighted and shown. Right? So there are these multiple senses in which theater is understood, particularly from scholarly perspective. So it's not always enough to say that theater is just an auditorium. Theater is also the performance. Um, and of course there is this distinction with the idea of the performance, because moving away from theater studies, we have shifted towards performance now, which is nothing but an embracing of a broader realm in terms of our everyday lives, our everyday presences. Particularly after Judith Butler and Richard Schechner, we know that we are constantly performing. We are always role playing, like just the example with which I began. Right now, I am delivering a talk. You can probably view only the PowerPoint, but I am performing at the background. So this whole the act of teaching is always an act of performance. Now, it all started off in New York University, where a different performance studies department was introduced in the 1980s. So this is how these three terms can be distinguished, and this is and the reference that I'm bringing in here is to Simon Shepherd and Mick Wallace's book, which is also the title of the book is also the title of the slide, which is Drama Theatre Performance. They quote R.W. Vince, who in 1989, you can see that there are four major concerns in contemporary theatre history. Number one is the relationship of theatre history to the study of dramatic literature. Okay, so dramatic literature, that is drama, and the relationship of theatre history. What is theatre history? The evolution of the theater, the place of the theater, and the evolution of the performance, and of course the evolution of the institution of theater. So these are the issues that we would be briefly taking up here. And the relationship of theater history to theater practice, the nature and scope of theater history as an academic discipline, and the relationship of data and the historian. Because when it comes to data, theater offers a very different set of data, and it is always nowadays, after the evolution of what we suggest as digital humanities in particular, the notion of data has changed, and how we handle theatrical data, particularly in terms of documentation, in terms of recording, that is of utmost importance. Okay, so these are the basic premises in which today's theater studies would evolve, and its history. Uh, Now, let us now move on to the thrust of today's talk, basically the modern in Indian theater. How do we understand, how do we negotiate the modern in Indian theater? You see, what happens is that we often use the word modern just like that. I mean, the modern Indian theater. We say without any proper sense of what exactly is this modernity, referring to. See, in India, very distinctly, the modernity is a colonial modernity. That is, particularly with reference to the Indian theater. The Indian theater became modern during the colonial period. During the 19th century, Professor Anando Lal distinguishes or identifies the middle half of the 19th century as the time, that is the 1850s or later, than slightly later, slightly after that, as the emergence of a kind of a modernity in Indian theater. And it's also important that we understand that for India, this process was very different compared to that in Europe or in other Western countries. Now, this modernity was simultaneously shaped by Western influences and a recognition of the importance of Sanskrit theater at the same time. So this dual influence was always working when it comes to a modern Indian theater, and this is something that we would continue. Okay, I mean this duality or this notion of simultaneity. Now there are various ways in which we can look at the notion of modernity in Indian theater. It is modern in terms of scenography, as you can see here, and design. This is Harishchandra. This is Haratendu Harishchandra, of course, one of the early figures of Hindi drama. In terms of actor and acting, as KRS Srinivas Iyengar mentions, in terms of anti-colonial resistance in the theater, something that we started seeing very early in West Bengal, or Bengal as such, and the new theatrical models that were developed by the professional Parsi theaters, and of course the wonderful symbolism of Rabindranath Tagore. So, as you can see, the modernity in Indian theater would be negotiated from different aspects and different angles. Now, when do we say that the play is modern, particularly with reference to the mid 19th century in Bengal? The plays became overtly political and satirized and began to satirize contemporary social realities. That is when it emerges as modern, and that is one of the this is also one of the important, what should I say, the reactions to this was the passing of the Dramatic Performances Act of 1876, which was the first instance of censorship. Now, so therefore what we can see is that modern Indian theatre had thus colonial origins and was fast growing in response to new developments in Western theatre. Now, this was also a theatre that was evidently urban. This theatre that we are talking of is an evidently urban theatre, since the middle class urban intellectuals had started building their own proscenium stages to stage such plays. Basically, we are beginning the process of modernity with this particular transformation in Indian theatre, because the idea of the proscenium was introduced by the British very early in the 1750s, and in Bombay and in Calcutta, the British built their own theatres, and that is where we started having our first exposure to what we refer to as a modern theatre. Now, once again, there are certain major events, historical events that are taking place. Vishnudas Bhave in the Marathi theatre did something very new. For some, this is the sign of modernity. Okay, the first ticketed shows for a native audience in Grant Road Theatre in Bombay in 1853. So this was the first time that the idea of the ticketed show started coming up, and very soon the Public Theatre of Bengal followed, which was also a ticketed show. And this is, you can see an excerpt from the contemporary newspaper Englishman in their edition of 20th November of 1872. They say, a few native gentlemen of Bagbazar have established a theatrical society named the Calcutta National Theatrical Society, their object being to improve the stage, as also encourage native youths in the composition of new Bengali dramas from the proceeds of sales of tickets. You see, this was not happening before, okay? Proceeds of sales of tickets. The attempt is a laudable one and is the first of its kind. So you can see the appreciation in Englishmen, but very soon, when very different kinds of anti-British plays would be staged, Englishmen would change their stance. So anyway, that was so for some, therefore, modernity involves the commercialization, the whole opening it up for the public, because you remember earlier, before this, the theater was primarily for a very private audience. Okay, yeah. So the modern can never be distinguished from the idea of the national, because the nation is imagined through a kind of an anti-colonial theater that began in the very 19th century, along with almost the emergence of the public theater in Bengal. And we know one of the signposts of this particular movement is Nil Darpan by Dinabandhu Mitra. And you see how national paper declares it. This was the first play with which the national theater comes up, or the Bengal theater comes up. National paper declares it as a play, as an event of national importance. Okay, but later on, I mean, there would be other reactions. This is just an interesting photograph that you might be interested in. National Theatre Shobha Bazar is advertising their grand farewell night. Remember, in those days, I mean, it is a grand farewell night, yes, because in this nomenclature, in this name of National Theatre, there are very interesting stories connected to this, but I won't be able to go into all of these. So it is saying that there will be a merger. Basically, now it will become the Great National Theatre. So it is the last night of National Theatre Shobha Bazar on 1873, 10th May. And what play are they performing? They are performing Gopal Kundola. And very interestingly, you can see that to conclude with the episode Bharat Sangeet. Bharat Sangeet could be a composition of course, Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, and we are not sure if it is the play the song that Bankim Chandra was using later in Ananda Moth, but this, of course, has got a very strong national component connected to this. And of course, after this, we move on to Girish Chandra Ghosh, again associated with the modernity of the Indian theatre at large. He was often referred to as Garrick of the East. I won't go into the details of Girish Chandra Ghosh's dramatic career, but one of the most important contributions that Girish Chandra Ghosh had towards theatre, actually it happened before Girish, but Girish was instrumental as an actor manager, as the playwright, as the director, in shaping the course of the later day theatre. And one of the major, of course, advances, one of the major improvisations that took place was the introduction of the woman. Too many, I would, or I personally, I would see this again, the introduction of the woman actress on the stage to be one of the fundamental, positions of modernity in our theatre. Now, yeah, that is the next thing that we briefly pick up. Each of these actually deserve greater treatment, but we won't be able to complete it in that case. So the actress in the public theatre is a distinct mark of modernity, and it happened with Bengal theatre introducing Shormishtha on 16th August 1873. You know, Michael Madhusudan Dotto had always wanted this, but he couldn't see it. Jagottarini, Golap, Elokeshi, and Shama were the first four women actors who were introduced on the stage. But you see how it's very interesting how the contemporary newspapers are reacting. I have just given two responses. It was a tragedy that gentlemen were being seen with prostitutes. Of course, these new women who are coming to the stage, they were not from any, they were not the Bhadra Mahila, so called, and they were often from the darker corners of society. And the stage managers, the second one by Hindu Patriot is also interesting. The stage managers should be careful not to stoop down to the level of the Jatra Walas, because you see, Jatra by that time was always using women in the cast. So there was a distinct difference between Jatra on the one hand and the public theatre on the other. 1881, let's focus on. So this is the introduction of the women in theatre. This is something that is happening around the 1870s, the late 1870s. And in 1881, Bharatendu Harishchandra is composing Andher Nagar, a musical farce that is critiquing society and politics. And at the same time, Rabindranath Tagore is staging on this very year Valmiki Pratibha, which is introducing the Bengali Gita Abhinoy, another major step towards modernity. Okay, and we will briefly spend time, although I have no expertise in terms of to talk about Tagore's theatre, but still, this is the very famous scene from Valmiki Pratibha, as you all know, and this is Tagore himself, the younger Tagore, And this is Indira Devi Chaudhurani in the role of Lokhi. What is interesting, can you see the stage, the background, the set that is? Does it appear that it is a stage, it is a proscenium stage? No. You see, this is something that is interesting. Actually, in Valmiki Pratibha, what we find is a strong adherence to a kind of a stage realism, which was a tradition that was being drawn from European theatre. And this was also the prevalent system in the professional stage of Calcutta during that time. Because you see, this is being staged in Jorashako. Nitindranath Tagore was in charge of this set, and this bit of information is from our discussion with my teacher, Professor Abhijit Chen from Vishwabharati, who is an expert here. So Nitindranath Tagore was in charge of this set and smeared the stage with mud, planting those grasses and little plants to the into the mud, and to create the impression of the kind of a realism. Okay, so this extreme form of realism was also, as Ubhijit had mentioned very interestingly, when the Bon Bibis were dancing to the tune of Rim Jim Ghono Ghono Re, Boroshe Rim Jim Ghono Ghono Re. Many of you would recognize this. It was actually raining, and this was an arrangement that was done through the water pipes of the washrooms in the rooms above. Okay, so that is the kind of extent to which Valmiki Pratibha had taken the stage realism. Now, this is very interesting because Tagore would move away from this kind of stage realism later on. This is Anandolal, who refers to Tagore. In many ways, Tagore was the pivotal figure of modern Indian theatre. Why? Because he stormed the bastions of domestic realism and picturesque entertainment, both of which followed the Western lead and proposed more imaginative stagecraft modeled after Sanskrit aesthetic. So that is what Anandolal has to say in one of his important articles on the historiography of modern theatre. And this is where I would briefly also refer to Rango Moncho. Many of theatre scholars are aware. I mean, I hope most of you are aware of this, but English students usually do not read Rango Moncho, which is why I think it is very important for us to take a glimpse at this very short essay by Rabindranath Tagore, which was published in 1902, which is where actually Rabindranath is positing his vision for an Indian aesthetics of the stage, and where he is rejecting the European realism. And this is where I would briefly read from Rango Moncho. Please, I hope most of the audience here is Bengali. And if there is somebody who is a non-Bengali, please excuse me for 2 minutes. শকুন্তলার কবিকে যদি রঙ্গমঞ্চে দৃশ্যপটের কথা ভাবিতে হইত, তবে তিনি গোড়াতেই মৃগের পশ্চাতে রথ ছোটানো বন্ধ করিতেন। অবশ্য তিনি বড় কবি, রথ বন্ধ হইলেই যে তাহার কলম বন্ধ হইত তাহা নহে। কিন্তু আমি বলিতেছি, যেটা তুচ্ছ তাহার জন্য যাহা বড়, তাহা কেন নিজেকে কোনো অংশে খর্ব করিতে যাইবে? ভাবুকের চিত্তের মধ্যে রঙ্গমঞ্চ আছে, সে রঙ্গমঞ্চে স্থানাভাব নাই, যেখানে জাদুকরের হাতে দৃশ্যপট আপনি রচিত হইতে থাকে। সেই মঞ্চ, সেই পটই নাট্যকারের লক্ষ্যস্থল। কোন কৃত্রিম মঞ্চ, কৃত্রিম পট কবি কল্পনার উপযুক্ত হইতে পারে না। That is, Rabindranath is here very consciously drawing attention to the distinction between Chittopot and Chitropot. Chitropot is the decor, the stage, the design, whereas Chittopot is the imagination of the audience. So for Rabindranath, it is more important that the audience, exercises their imagination, and therefore it is not necessary that the things, that the set has to be realistically presented. Okay, so this is another. Just a minute. So moving on from here, Harishchandra, if we briefly focus on Bharatendu Harishchandra, for Harishchandra, you see again the characteristic of the modern is the repeated change of scene and narrative segregation, which is implemented by the recurrent shift of the painted background. Now, moving on very quickly to IPTA, the next major phenomenon in towards both modernity and a kind of an identification of the premise of the national. It So IPTA, or the Indian People's Theatre Association, was trying to decolonize theatre and reach out to the masses. Where if you look at the lines, you can see that there are the cultural awakening of the masses of India. There's emphasis on to revive the lost in that heritage by reinterpreting and adopting and integrating it with people's lives. So it stands for a kind of a justice and democratic culture. The movement IPTA's position in this journey towards modernity is very significant. Now, if we quickly come back once again, if you remember, at one point of time, I was talking of the, the modern theater as urban theater. Now, this leads on to a kind of a binary or a binarization. So, the modern theater, which is playwright initiated, text driven, and plot based, is marginalized indigenous performance driven genres of theater, which was based on actor improvisation, composed of short and unrelated pieces of entertainment, and or a number of song and movement sequences. So this was something more indigenous, more close or akin to our own culture. So there was this system of binarization that occurred in the theater to come. And what is this binary? A modern, urban, avant-garde theater influenced by the West, and on the other hand, a classical, folk, and indigenous and rural theater, right? So the clash, I won't say clash, but there was a kind of a distinction that began to be made between a certain kind of a high and a low culture. And this is where the post-independence phase becomes important of the Indian theater. Um, and the post-independence phase was a very important phenomenon right after 1947, because it was concerned with a kind of a reconstruction, a kind of an understanding of what our theater should be. Where are we exactly moving towards? And the word synthesis, I will come back to it repeatedly. So, and of course, I have also talked of decolonizing the stage. This was a conscious strategy now. We needed to decolonize. So, our modernity is a colonial modernity. And after independence, in order to establish an identity, a theatrical identity of our own, what we needed was a decolonization of the stage. That is where the theater of roots, many people say, come in. And the theater of roots, interestingly, however, is anti-modern. Now, why I'm emphasizing these is that in the realm of the modern, the anti-modern also resides. That is where also you see, we are all aware of Mulk Raj Anand as a novelist, but Mulk Raj Anand had a very significant opinion about the Indian theater. And this is where Mulk Raj Anand, in his book, if you come across this book, many of you have read it, of course, but those of you who have not, I would recommend you. This is a very small, it's brief, position that Mulk Raj Anand has taken, a synthesis of urban theater and folk performances that will bring us to the basis of a new kind of theatrical expression. Right? So our knowledge of the old folk theater with the needs of today, that would create a new indigenous tradition of the Indian theater. So this idea of synthesis was always there just after the independence, and this leads on to the, if you remember, then again I had started off with the sense of the theater as an institution of national importance. So in order to properly rebuild a cultural identity, it is important that national institutions emerge. And Sangeet Natak Academy came up in 1953 as, of course, as a Nehruvian vision. And you see, what is interesting is in the name, the nomenclature, right? The Sangeet Natak Academy, which uses the Sanskrit compound Sangeet Natak and an indigenization of the idea of academy. As you can see in the second point, academy with a Y to academy with a K and an I. Okay, there's the shift. And this is something that is very interesting. We'll come back to this. Now, two important points here around this phase is the first drama seminar. There was a first drama seminar that was organized in 1956 by the Sangeet Natak Academy. Now, this seminar was inaugurated by the then Vice President, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. Sachin Sengupta was there as the seminar director. And there is a very famous story with associated with this seminar, which Edin B. Me and Aparna Dharwarkar have also referred to. And this story is associated with Raja Rammar desire to know what kind of drama should be India's future. And he asked the academy to find it for him. Right. And so the proceedings of the seminar was a major step towards this finding out. That is, what kind of drama would be our Indian theater. And actually, in this seminar, 40 theater practitioners were invited from across the entire country. And many significant people of those days, Mulk Raj Anand himself, K.M. George from Kerala, Shombu Mitro, and all the stalwarts of Indian theatre were present during that seminar. And nowadays we have a lot of seminars, but the 1956 first drama seminar is a historical event. And the first drama seminar was they proposed that a central institution of training should be set up, and this led on to the establishment of the National School of Drama in 1959. So all these were major advances that were happening. Now, just to take back another look at this whole idea of the academy. You see, this is Academy of Fine Arts. All of you will probably recognize. Those of you who are from Kolkata would easily know that this is the center of the theatrical activity in Kolkata. And of course, unfortunately, in these COVID times, it is no longer working. But you see, the academy, the spelling that the Academy of Fine Arts uses is the colonial one. Why is it so? Because it was established way back in 1933. It's only Lady Ranu Mukherjee, located this particular spot for the academy later on, right? Anyway, so there was an explosion of theatrical activity. And now we come over to the big four of modern Indian drama. Many critics have referred to this, the big four of modern Indian drama. I won't be able to devote full time to them, and it won't be right also. But of course, you recognize that this is clockwise. If we go, this is Badal Sircar, Mohan Rakesh, Vijay Tendulkar, and Girish Karnad. I've kept Girish Karnad last because we lost Girish Karnad the last. Very recently, in the last year, in 2019, Girish Karnad passed away, putting an end to an entire generation of dramatists who are recognized as the big four. Now, how their plays, you see, Badal Sircar is writing in Bengali, Mohan Rakesh is writing in Hindi, Vijay Tendulkar in Marathi, Girish Karnad in original Kannada. But their plays became national events, and that is how the national theatre started emerging. There is a very complicated and a complex interrelationship between this whole issue of regional identity, regional language, and a national theatre. Of course, there are many ways in which Badal Sircar's modernity can be engaged with. Again, I'm not going into that in Ebong Indrajit or in Baki Itihash. There is a very different vision of contemporary history that Badal Sircar is taking up. If you look at Mohan Rakesh's Ashar Ka Ek Din, which was a Sanskrit redoing of a Sanskrit play, Rabindranath says that it is the first modern Hindi play that dealt with the relationship between state patronage and creativity. Vijay Tendulkar also, as you know, brought complexity and maturity into modern Indian theatre through different social issues that he was raising. And for Girish Karnad, I will just briefly talk of HAYAVADANA, as you can see in these posters. Now, HAYAVADANA had these sources, intertextual sources of both the Katha Sarit Sagar and Thomas Mann's novella. And now I'm not going into any of these critical content of the text as such. I'm talking of the theater. I'm talking of the historiography of these plays and the ways in which they were contributing towards a major development in the history or development of Indian theater. So HAYAVADANA, what happened was that it emerged as the poster play for the theater of roots movement. And Suresh Awasthi, who was a major champion of the theater of roots movement, was of the opinion that Karnad had evolved a new dramatic form in HAYAVADANA. The play expressed what could be done creatively with folk forms in an urban setting, and that Hayavadana reversed the colonial course of contemporary theatre. So the emergence of urban folk theatre is again something that has been widely debated and a very significant issue in relation with the idea of synthesis that I have been harping on, is the form of the urban folk. And Hayavadana can be seen as a classic example of the urban folk theatre. That is a play made for the urban stages, but something that incorporates the folk elements to a kind of a perfection, a kind of a fruition. And Erin B. Mee has a very wonderful term to express this. She says that this was a hybrid form of theater that was neither Western nor Indian, but both Western and Indian. So it is not as if it's a relation of binaries. That it was not, it was neither Western nor Indian, but at the same time both Western and Indian. And that is the kind of experimentation that was being done. Something that many critics have referred to as the explosion of theatrical activity during the phase up to the 1980s. And Shomik Bandyopadhyay, for example, has referred to this as a renaissance of Indian theatre. Right? So these tendencies were always happening. The next figure, it would be wrong to miss him out. I mean, the remaining of my lecture would focus on some individual figures, like of course Habib Tanvir, who doesn't belong to the big four as such, but Habib Tanvir's contribution to the modern Indian theatre is again something that is very important and very unique. um, Habib Tanvir was experimenting with the folk theatre. Habib Tanvir went back to his village in Chhattisgarh, and he set up the Naya theatre with tribal actors employing the folk forms, and presented to us a wonderful range of theatrical experimentations. For example, in Charanda's Chor, Habib Tanvir combines certain kind of pre-modern narratives with a political modernity that that concerns with oppression, that concerns with corruption. So you see, all of these activists, these radical theatrical figures, were questioning the ways in which we engage with the idea of modernity. Now, Habib Tanvir's position was starkly anti-modern. He was against these urban stages, this urban kind of West-influenced theaters. And but you see, as you can see, what Javed Malik says, what was his uniqueness was that how Indian theatre could be simultaneously delightfully traditional and poignantly contemporary or modern. The Naya theatre experiment with, Habib Tanvir's experiment with the folk actors of the Chhattisgarh. And what was also interesting was that Habib Tanvir was using the Chhattisgarhi dialect for these plays, right? And again, I mean, this is not enough to be. We can talk at length about Habib Tanvir, because Habib Tanvir was largely influenced by Brecht. One of the major aspects in which the West is present in the form of the urban folk, you might say the urban folk, or you might say even the urban theater that uses folk forms is Brecht, because Brecht's approach of the kind of a defamiliarization or this alienation that Brecht refers to is something that was strongly present in our folk theaters already. So Brecht uh, formed a very interesting model, and Habib Tanvir himself was there in Germany. He learned in Germany, he learned in London, he learned at the best places, he learned theater, and when he came back to India, he returned to his roots. He had always believed that the theater must be one which is deeply connected to one's own roots. From here, we move on to another figure, of course, Mahesh Dattani. Although I won't, I won't be able to devote my entire time regarding Mahesh Dattani. But why is it important that we consider Mahesh Dattani at the same breath with all these? Now, what I've seen is a problematic take of scholars usually branding Mahesh Dattani as one of the important figures of Indian English theatre, as if Indian English theatre belongs to a different planet altogether. No, it's not that. Mahesh Dattani, I mean, Earlier, it was a different scenario, but with Mahesh Dattani, what we have is that his the themes that he evokes, the issues of, or what we refer to as quote unquote the invisible issues that Mahesh Dattani has probed, makes him very much a part of the living tradition of Indian theatre. And this is the first time actually we have an English dramatist who writes in English, but one who engages very strongly with a living tradition of theatre. And that is where Mahesh Dattani's contribution to the Indian theatre lie. And of course, in the historiography of Indian theatre, we can never leave out Mahesh Dattani, particularly for his take on issues of gender, issues of in 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 general invisible issues that the society didn't want to see so far. Mahesh Dattani has spoken once again of the urban, the family. For Dattani, the family unit has been so important. Now we are just approaching the end, and this is where I would just like to briefly dwell some more time on this the new phenomenon, I would say, called Amitesh Grover. And with Amitesh Grover, I would also basically like to suggest the multiple ways, the multiple modernities actually, in which our theatre has evolved. The modern Indian theatre has the directions, the multiple directions that it has taken. And this person, Amitesh Grover, is a young theatre and performance artist, I would say. He calls himself, very interestingly, an interdisciplinary artist, as you can say. See, and he has his works move beyond theater into the realm of visual arts, into the realm of films, photography, music, installations, and I will just introduce one of his works, which is where basically I will come back to Habib Tanvir. And he's a Mash Fika awardee as the new media artist, and this happened in 2019. Before that, he was the recipient of several international awards, and he has curated collaborative performance art projects also abroad. Now, why I want to end with Amitesh Grover? Many of you might be aware of his work, but I wish to for those who are unaware, I wish to introduce Amitesh Grover's fascinating and brilliant world of a new kind of performance as part of a new tradition of modern Indian theatre, maybe. So let us see. And yeah, so this is the text that I wish to take a look into is Table Radica, not a text but a performance. And Table Radica is a what should I say, a major plan that spans across 5 or 6 episodes. But the first episode is dedicated to Habib Tanvir, and that is why I was saying that Table Radica is a return to Habib Tanvir. Let us look at the second point first. So assume that Table Radica is a performance about Habib Tanvir. Now, if you look at the written text here, Table Radica pivots around Habib's encounters with love, questions about theatre, his relationship with the homeland, and the turmoils of making choices that eventually lead Habib to be remembered as a radical life. Okay, so that is why Table Radica. See, you can, if you read this, you will see that this is just a kind of a summary of a new theater that deals with stalwart of the early Indian, the modern Indian theater phase. You must be, I mean, all of us are aware of the biopics, the rising popularity of biopics in terms of films. Even in theater, this is happening. Theatrical lives are coming back on stage, which is a very important sign, which is a very significant development, I would say. And it's very important because if we through performance, if we look back at a particular phase, then we have newer ways of reconstructing that past. Now, but so far it seems just like that, but this is nothing like that, because Table Radhika, now go to the first point, is an edible mashup, historical archive, a recipe of life, performance, and critique. What is it? It is an immersive experience of memoirs with food, found documents, and music. All sorts of stimuli are brought to the table to touch, to taste, to see, or to hold. Table Radica is basically a table. Okay. And now we will take a look at some of the photos. You see, table Radica is a very different, intimate performance act where there is a table, where there is a platter basically, and the audience here are invited as guests. You can see this. This is basically a photo from the end of the performance, because there is a chaos. There is food that is actually served in the performance, and you can see the photograph. It refers. If you are careful enough, you can see that it is written Charan Das Chor. So it's about Charan Das Chor, and it's a brilliant archival work actually that strands several layers. If you look at the next photo, yeah. So the platter that is prepared to serve to the guests, and the next photo will make it clear. Now this is the performance. This is the most famous photograph of the performance, where you can see it's just about a 30 odd audience. It's an intimate theater. It's an immersive theater. It's an experience of intimate theater where a very select audience are allowed, and they will sit on that table, which is the table Radica, while Amitesh Grover, as you can see him, reads out and surrounds them on all sides. As the performance review, there is a performance review of Table Radica. Actually, the last performance was held in May 2019. There was also one near the end of 2019. So this was already a performance that was going on before the COVID-19 situation came in. And probably in a way, this immersive theater experience, this intimate theater experience, is also the kind of solution that we have, that the future has towards in the coming days. Now, at the head of the table stands Amitesh, reading a text which is punctuated with pauses and music that invoke the spectacular journey of Habib Tanvir's life. Multiple moments that influence the playwright's life, all they come alive through a dish, a tasting portion of which was served to the audience. So what this performance does is it's in its unique ways, it engages with the multiple senses in which we understand the idea of taste, which is gastronomic on the one hand, and on the other, philosophical as well. That is how Habib Tanvir develops his taste. What kind of taste? Not just the taste of food, but the taste of poetry, the taste of philosophy, the taste of life. So taste, and you see, the audience is made to touch the photographs, archival materials. They listen to the music of archival music of Charan Das Chor. They hear the text that Amitesh, as you can see here, is reading out to them from table Radhika, which is again a kind of a poetic, creative presentation of Habib Tanvir's journey as a theater. So ultimately, the audience who take their seats at the table as strangers emerge as friends, emerge as people who know each other because they have spoken to them while on the table, and that has happened through an immersive sensory performance. So it's a sensory. They touch, they feel, and in what Amitesh does is not only in this but in other performances also. He takes this layers of the whole performance of taste to an entirely different level. Now, this is of course the last slide, and this is where I will end with this wonderful photograph. As you can see, these are all available in Amitesh Grover's website, and you can go there and take a look. Thank you, Tanmoy. It's over to you now.
Thank you, Dada, for this overwhelming, vibrant presentation on Indian English drama slash theater. So now it's time for the question answer session. I will invite questions from the participants, and they can write them down in the YouTube section, comment section of the YouTube. So already we have received many questions, so I'm just making them visible to your screen, Dada. Am I audible, Dada?
Yeah, you are audible, but I can't see any
No,
questions.
no, I'm just making it visible to your screen. You can have a look.
Yeah, yes. Guti Malik Goswami's question is Brechtian theatre, especially Brecht, focused on a realist stage and requested his audience not to hang your brain in the cloakroom along with the coat. Yes, of course, but oh, do you see similarity with Tagore's idea of Chittapot, and how important you think that active engagement of audience is necessary to deconstruct the plot, performance, staged, presented? Yeah, it's a very important question. Yes, it would be difficult to say that Tagore's works, or the way Tagore had approached. You see, in when it comes to Tagore, first of all, I'm not a Tagore expert, but Tagore had several phases in his development as an artist was constantly evolving, constantly changing. The Valmiki Pratibha that I showed was and something that was absolutely against any kind of Brechtian, ideas. But of course, later on, if you look at Raktokorobi, or if you look at Muktodhara, even Tagore is changing, and Tagore is looking towards a more symbolic way of approaching the whole idea of the stage. I won't say this is entirely influenced by Brecht, because later on, because for Tagore it was a literary drama primarily. For Brecht, it was more of a performance that was important, the experience that was important, and the way in which that performative experience is undercutting social realities. Brecht was constantly believing it is necessary for us to break the flow of reality, so that the audience never moves into the phase of catharsis. So it is necessary that the audience should not identify pity and fear with it. Yeah, I think that is basically. Of course, there are several layers. That is what Dr. Goswami was trying to suggest. Can we move on to Devabrota's question? Can we say that there is a constant intermingling of the Western and the indigenous in the evolution of modern Indian theatre, as opposed to a radical and complete decolonization? Yes, of course. That is what would be my take, and that is what the history has also told us. Radical and complete decolonization is not possible, I would say. If you look at the several books on post-colonial, for example, post-colonial drama, Helen Gilbert and John Tompkins, and other Bran Crow and Chris Bainfield have also talked about post-colonial situation. We cannot say for in that way, in that sense, that to decolonize is to throw away all this 200-year long heritage, or even more, if I'm not wrong. So probably that is not possible. Rather, what we need to see into this is how we can merge, how we can combine, how we can move towards an idea of synthesis. Okay, so the West will always be present, because those are Western models, those are Western ways of thinking have always influenced us. But what is important for us is to understand, to identify, to realize, to reconstruct our past, to keep our anchorage strong. Okay, so it's the contest is not with the kind of a Western theater, but it is important that we do not forget our own heritage. That is what I think is more important. uh, yeah, Sutanuka, thank you very much for this question. Can you focus a bit on gender dynamics in theater? Actually, you probably understood that it was not possible to talk of the whole thing. Um, when I was talking of a distinct mark of modernity, as I was referring to the emergence of the women in the public theater of Bengal. Okay. Now, the emergence of women was, I look at it as a significant historical event. In that sense, I was referring to this term. But of course, when it comes to gender, when it comes to women in Indian theatre, there has been very important, very good work that has been done. Unfortunately, once again, since my focus was also on theatre, I mean research on Indian theatre, a lot is yet to be done on how women have contributed to the modern Indian theatre. Of course, there are very good works that are Tutun Mukherjee's staging resistance, for example. Lakshmi Chandra's works are there on women directors, women actors. Neelam Mansingh Chowdhury there are Anuradha Kapoor, there is Gitanjali Shri. Many people are working. Particularly important is Aur Kitne Tukre, Kirti Jain. That was in Delhi. In Bengal also, we have had a huge tradition of women directors taking up the center stage. But there has been in India, there has been the women directors have resisted um, being referred to as feminist, directors. Women directors have looked at just probably how GP Deshpande was referring to the fact that my task is not to define an Indian theater. My task is to define theater. So similarly, the women directors would say that we are theater personnel, we are theater directors, we are not women theater directors. So there are problems of these categorizations that are always there, but of course you cannot deny, there is no denial of the fact that women have had a very important contribution, and it requires a proper research and attention to the several dynamics, several aspects of this.
Okay,
Yeah, I
Dada,
mean,
I missed a question. So that was a continuation of Devabrata Adhikari's question. Uh, so here is that question.
no. What was the confusion? Okay. Anyway, how do you think that the process of a pan-national consciousness getting formed through the growth of theater culture only in particular Indian cities and states? Yeah. See, there are several. I don't know whether you're a scholar, it seems, but you see, if you read Aparna Dharwarkar's Theatres of Independence, which is a brilliant take on the evolution of a post-colonial theatre, where Dharwarkar is actually addressing all of these issues. Um, yes, if we look at a modern urban theater or the experience of the evolution of a theater culture, it has been city centric. But very interestingly, there have been non-urban, theatrical centers as well. Probably the Ninasam in Hegodu, something that KV Subarna has been doing. It's an excellent, immersive, and an interactive theatrical experience. If you look at the theater culture in Manipur, for example, there is also this theater, this concept of the theatrical community coming together, and their theatrical experiences are very distinct and very different to the urban city-based theater. I think it's Rehearsals of Revolution, but I'm not sure if I'm getting it wrong. But Rustam Barucha is referring. I mean, he's Rustam Barucha is strongly criticizing this city-oriented, theatrical culture that has evolved in India, and he gives a lot of importance to the Ninasam in Egodu. uh, if you look at
So
if you just one sec, if we just extend this to the contemporary times, you see, it's a future for the future. The kind of theater work that is going on in the outskirts of Kolkata is excellent, and that would show, that would also emerge as a different kind of a theatrical experience. Okay, so there is a decentering that is always going on. Yes.
okay, so this will be the last questions we take for today from Abhishek Roy.
Thank you, Abhishek. In the present time, when the folk is constantly getting encroached by modern urban experiences, um, How would you like to see folk theater in the present time? Yes, there are always pitfalls. I don't know what kind of take I should I should be responding to, but there have always been pitfalls. If you look at Franz Fanon, the pitfalls of national consciousness are always there. Similarly, there are the whole notion of working with the folk is always problematic as long as you are not actively a part of that tradition. The moment you are coming from an urban theatrical experience and you're trying to create something sensational, and therefore you take up some folk elements, there is always this risk of kind of an intra colonization that goes on. Yes, there have been many examples. I don't want to talk of those, but there have been many such instances. There has been a very strong critique also. You see, the direction that, if you look at the politics of the formation of an Indian theatre, the direction that this Indian theatre was taking by the 1972 round table, I think, that was organized by the SNA, it was clear that if it has to be Indian theatre, there has to be a folk element attached with it. And then you see the Sangeet Natak Academy was also giving out scholarships to directors who would work with folk themes. So there was a constant encouragement on the part of the central government institutions so that the folk theatre form thrives. And that after the 1980s, that resulted in a kind of a backlash, right? That resulted in a misuse of the governmental grants, so that people started taking up these folk idioms without even going to the core of it. So that is not wanted. So what we expect, even if we are dealing with an urban folk, we should be very careful in handling those elements. I have dealt with these issues in other lectures, in other papers, actually, in the pre-COVID times, of course, where one example is Devi Sharpamasta. I hope you have seen this. Devesh Chattopadhyay's Devi Sharpamasta, for me, is one of the brilliant examples of the urban folk theatre that is possible in a contemporary world today. Yeah.
Okay, here we can end the question and answer session here. So for today, and if they have any more questions, so they can address them to me. So I will pass them to you.
Yes, of course, of course. I would be more than glad, more than happy.
And
Yeah.
thank you very much for giving us this precious time, and gladly that you accepted my invitation, my request gladly. So I am thankful for that. Now it's time for the formal vote of thanks, and for that I request our students of PG Madhurima to offer you the formal vote of thanks.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, sir. Good evening, everyone. I pray to God that everyone is healthy. I, Madhurima Kaur, student of UG Second Sem, Midnapur College, Autonomous, very glad to having giving to delivery a vote of thanks this time. First of all, on behalf of our Department of English and on my own behalf, I would like to thank our respected speaker, Dr. Samipendra Banerjee, Assistant Professor of English, University of Gour, Banga, for sharing his knowledge with us and delivering such an enchanting and interesting lecture on historicizing the stage and overview of modern Indian drama or theatre. We all are really grateful to you, sir, and feel fortunate to have you in our session. I also convey our heartfelt gratitude to our Honorable Principal, Sir Dr. Gopal Chandra Bera, for giving the permission to arrange such a wonderful lecture series. And of course, I don't know if I will get a better opportunity to thank our Professor Tormoy Kundu, sir. So thank you very much, sir, for organizing the session. We are really proudful for having taken your commendable initiative that brings together all the fellow students to take acquire education through online lecture series at least for 1 or 2 hours per day in this adverse situation. And last but not the least, I also appreciate all the participants who have joined the session and made it a success. I request them to stay with us and participate in all ensuing lecture series to enrich their own knowledge capacity. Thank you all. Stay home, stay healthy.
Okay, thank you, Madhurima.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
So
Thank
that this is the process initiative I have taken to involve our students.
Yes.
So give them an opportunity to speak to our global audience.
That is